Thank you very much, Raven and Billy Barria. We have coming up Group B's other initial match between Tansoku and his opponent, DacCarp. Just wanted to make sure I say, is it, because their name is like DDAC, I think, but they're just shortening it as Doc. So I'm not sure if it's Dac or DacCarp. And coming up here, we have a pretty interesting match featuring Even Shaman. We're going to see whether or not the Shaman can continue its streak as we jump straight into the middle of the series, up 2-0 for Tansoku from Japan. And DacCarp, we've seen him a couple times on stream so far. What do you think about his lineup now that we've seen him kind of take a little bit of a middling approach? He's got the Cube Warlock, he's got the Even Shaman, an odd Rogue, and an Even Paladin. Very unusual.
It is quite unusual, but this is one of the takes of the tournament that I think has really been a big talking point. The fact that not very many people brought Even Shaman to the tournament and that it's put people through to the top 8 point to compete in the dual tournament stage, I think is really impressive. The more that I see the deck, the stronger it looks to me as well. And it's got a very concise game plan of where it wants to go. I think it's better in a banned format than it would be just in ranked play, for instance.
True.
But definitely a very strong deck in its own right. I mean, just the stark contrast in the lineups in general, I think is a really big talking point. You know, Tansoku, he'd also brought Control Warrior to this tournament, the odd cost Control Warrior. And that was a deck that last week Dog had said he didn't know how he won games when Control Warrior wasn't banned. He was anticipating it getting banned. And this week, it once again performed very strong.
I feel like guys like Dog, though, are very quick to be modest about their results. He often underplays or downplays his own execution of the deck. Most people who were onlooking saying Control Warrior looked really good if you were playing on point, which Dog was doing, and Fibonacci and a few other players who were really executing or firing on all cylinders in the previous week. That being said, Tansoku just needs to win with this Spiteful Druid, which has proven to be really powerful. Now comes up on a turn where he wants to play Greedy Sprite, given that his hand is pretty expensive, but he also wants to deal with things like this Direwolf Alpha, which is also problematic because even Paladin tends to get ahead of the Spiteful Druid on board.
Yeah, and pretty much no matter how you slice this, it looks like DacCarp's going to get ahead. I mean, his turn 4 isn't looking juicy, I would say, but you know, once he moves towards that Sunkeeper Tarim spot, that's really where things get dicey for Tansoku. You know, his biggest turn is a Spiteful Summoner turn, and what that means is that DacCarp, if he has any amount of board presence, gets to completely flip that on its head with Sunkeeper Tarim, or if that Spiteful has to wait a little bit because DacCarp is so far ahead on board, he can get punished by equality turns.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to sum this up in a situation where Tansoku ends up ahead in the next couple of turns. That window closes very quickly against Even Crossbound.
You can see that this is how much he values his early game tempo, just leaving the Greedy Sprite stranded for a while. And that blessing of King's Draw after the Spellbreaker has been played.
Yep. And I agree with the Spellbreaker play here. He's just got to get the strongest thing he can on board and try to do anything he can to get control of this. It's just not going to pan out. It's a very big punish for a 5-mana turn. And honestly, True Silver would have done the same thing. Call to Arms is doing the same thing. It's, you know, all the best cards in DacCarp's deck punish Tansoku for just having his deck built this way.
Well, that being said, you know, I'm kind of looking at some ways for Druid of Claw to charge and fight back onto the board. And if Tansoku can set up for a good Spiteful Summoner, it'll force DacCarp to forego a development turn, which I think would be the big thing. Except that's what Sunkeeper Tarim is so good at. It's able to do both.
And just the Argent Commanders coming in pairs. And, you know, this is a card that fights very well historically, I think, against a lot of Druid cards where they try to seed something in just a strong body on the board. And, you know, like I think back to Druid of the Claw, sure, it's acting as its own Argent Commander here, but an Argent Commander right back is one of the best answers you can have to it.
Well, he also has Call to Arms that leads directly into a Sunkeeper Tarim turn as well. There is the mind control tech to be mindful of, considering that Tansoku runs 2 of those MCTs.
Yeah, I would definitely say if there's a card that can change the Argent Commander, Call to Arms is probably it. You know, the idea of having to get jugglers down to take care of the board, though, I just don't feel is super appealing to DacCarp right now. So rather than take that risk, he just wants to play it straight up. I mean, why not? He's got 10 damage cracking away with an Equality Avenging Wrath in hand. This is a difficult spot to fall behind from.
Yeah, it's not every day where a Spiteful Summoner most likely is going to still put you behind on tempo. Given that the Ultimate Infestation will summon at worst 7 or 8 attack minion, but really the big problem is the Sunkeeper Tarim. But even if it wasn't Sunkeeper Tarim, it's the fact that Equality can kind of reset this board.
Yep.
And look at the amount of pressure coming in here from DacCarp.
So good. Yeah, just shift everything down to 3-3. Have fun. And fun is the opposite of what Tansoku's having this game.
Well, he does pick up his Spellbreaker, which allows him to silence his own Deathwing to bring it back up to 12-12 stats.
Yeah, from his perspective,
I
mean, for his perspective, that probably is the one way to get back into the game. Crypt Lord to try to protect the health total, and Spellbreaker, and hope that this Deathwing can close the clock in on DacCarp. It's just we're looking at a quality Avenging Wrath from DacCarp's perspective, and that's checkmate. It's just such a powerful tool when you're able to grasp that board and get ahead. You know, approaching that 8-mana turn is really where you want to have your big damage push come in as well. Because even if you don't have that combination, it threatens that as well.
Well, the quality and Avenging Wrath will do it, and DacCarp strikes back, able to get an important win on the board. But remember, this is his best matchup. That's remaining against the Spiteful Druid.
Yeah. Tansoku's got 3 tries to get this done with Spiteful Druid as well. I mean, 3 tries against Spiteful Druid, or with Spiteful Druid rather, that is the good position to be in. That deck can just get explosive starts, and it's tough for it to simply just have a failure draw 3 games in a row. It's a very difficult deck to target as well. You know, even Paladin, I think, does a great job against it, but the rest of DacCarp's lineup, it's going to have to pull some weight if he wants to beat it.
Well, the thing is, though, that Spiteful Druid does struggle against the 3 remaining decks of DacCarp here, because even Paladin is the best matchup, but then there's even Shaman. Even Shaman's pretty good at Spiteful Druid getting ahead. And then you have Odd Rogue, which is also a good deck at pressuring the Spiteful Druid before you hit that turn 6.
True story.
So we'll find out what happens. Who is going to be able to take it? Is it the one who has gotten the lead and just has enough chances to get through? Or is it the person that's targeting things like the Spiteful Druid to be able to be successful? We'll find out what happens between Tansoku and DacCarp when we return to the Asia Pacific Summer Playoffs. Welcome back, everybody, to the Asia Pacific Summer Playoffs. It is the final day of playoffs for this summer season before we go into the championships happening at the end of June. We have 12 out of our 16 players determined, and the winner of this match between Tansoku and DacCarp will be able to fight for one of those 4 spots in the winner's match of this dual tournament. So let's go into game number 4. Now, we did some math. Tansoku, being up 2-0, has 3 unfavorable matchups going up against Even Paladin, Even Shaman, and Odd Rogue. That being said, even though he has unfavorables, he's still an 80% favorite to take the series despite that, because he still has a fighting chance with Spiteful Druid, which has decent curves. Like with this, look at his hand. It's actually pretty competitive against an Even Shaman.
Yeah, that data's pulled from an aggregate pool of data as well. You know, and that's an approximation. But when you have 3 tries, even in an unfavorable spot, you're pretty likely to just win one of those games. Like, you're very likely to win one of those games. And so DacCarp has done step number 1. It's to beat Tansoku the first time. But having to do it 3 times in a row, it's just a tall order, honestly. I mean, him having to start off with this Stormforged Axe here, Glacial Shard gets to punish this a little bit, and then he leads right into Greedy Sprite, and suddenly Tansoku has a board lead against a deck whose entire dedication is to get ahead on board and never lose it. Yeah. Even Shaman sacrifices a lot of powerful things in order to be able to use Merc Spark Heal, in order to be able to use Corpse Taker packages and get 1-cost totems online. If you're not able to take advantage of that early on, there's very few tools that recover that state.
Yeah. Very similar to Even Paladin is that you get the advantage of being able to leverage your early game board, but
oh, and Tar Creeper even might throw a different plan into here now as well. You know, being able to trade off the totem.
Man,
Tar Creeper protects from the Stormforged Axe hits, and DacCarp drew the other Stormforged Axe, so he has got pretty much a completely dead card in hand, because by the time that second activation of the weapon rolls around, he's not going to have enough life left.
And that's when you gotta, you know, switch specializations and dual wield those Stormforged Axe. Or go back into time and get Maelstrom Portal.
Are you suggesting Doomhammer in our Even Shaman deck?
No, I'm just suggesting some design opportunities for Team 5. But in all seriousness, this is kind of a dire situation for DacCarp. The good news is that Knife Juggler has a 60% chance of killing off one of these minions on board.
Put this apple on your head.
And you might even get Taunt Totem, which can buy you a little bit of space.
He needs a lot of space right now. I mean, this damage is going to start adding up real quick as he just hits in to Tar Creeper. It's 2 more minions for Tansoku to add. Knife Juggler is going to bite the dust, and he's got Fungalmancer to follow this. DacCarp is about as close to dying very quickly as you get against Spiteful Druid. And Spiteful Druid's a deck that relies on just a compounding board issue to really take advantage of things, and here Tansoku is just going aggro on him. It's bad news.
I mean, all the cards that Shaman would love to use in this position are just a little weak. But Serenade Chain Gang here is very impressive if your opponent didn't have Fungalmancer.
Yes, and it's really a big story of this, I think, is DacCarp is drawing a super heavy hand. I mean, granted, he does have Lich King, Agatha, Alakir, Greymane, 2 Argent Commanders, but he drew the second Stormforged Axe, and then he drew 3 of his 6+ drops. Like, this is pretty darn unlucky for this situation to fall into DacCarp's side.
Yeah, he's going to be on 5 mana as well, so he can't even utilize Argent Commander to win back tempo on the board. His play next turn is looking like Stormforged Axe and Direwolf Alpha. I think he's in desperate need to get the right totems from this position. Defender of Argus is not going to do much here.
And the Stormforged Axe shuts him off of a 6-mana turn next turn as well. Just play out his stuff, let it get beat up, and hope that you can recover from there. Down to 11.
So Tansoku's just gonna win through just the Malfurion. Okay, well,
take your pick. I mean, just play something.
Well, what's the way that Tansoku can lose? And I feel like Spiteful Summoner actually sets up a position for Hex to make him lose steam and potentially give DacCarp some way to swing the board.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, the 1/5 taunts protect a lot of sustained damage on board. And so that's easily the game plan if I'm in Tansoku's spot. You're totally safe on life. You have a Spiteful Summoner that you can play next turn. Just, you know, defend what you have. And DacCarp, nothing in here recovers this really. Maybe a Corpse Taker.
Corpse Taker would be the big pickup.
Now, it's Spellbreaker even in Tansoku's hand. You know, just from DacCarp's perspective, he's praying for something defensive. It's just not there.
Defender Vargas, his best play, but I think that's just it. Spellbreaker should be able to help push through all this. And just a simple hero power will do. And Tansoku's Spiteful Druid will push through even Shaman. DacCarp is going to concede, which means that Tansoku moves on to the winner's match. And then, of course, we'll have, you know, his opponent will fall to the lower brackets. Take a look at Group B and actually see what's going to be happening. Starting from Group A, excuse me. Glory will be playing Kin in the winner's match. And then we saw Matsuri, fellow Japanese player, will be playing Blood Trail in the lower bracket.
Yeah, elimination matches are where things start to get really tense. You've competed for months to earn this slot. You've made it to the top 8, but now it's do or die. It's win or go home. The winner of that advances to the decider, where they'll play the loser of Glory and Kin. And then in Group B, looking at a similar story, Jinsu has been putting up a pretty impressive string of performances, but Tansoku's been doing the same issue as well.
That's right, but of course, Carp and Xiaodai both have a chance in elimination, but they still have to win 2 games, or 2 series rather, in order to come back. It doesn't matter if you lose, just win 2, and you're through. And you join us into Summer Championships. Let's take a look at our next match coming up for you guys at